Jake Morrison sat at the long metal table and tried not to let his anger show on his face. The giant chamber around him buzzed with the voices of 100 different alien species, all talking about how to run the galaxy. The walls curved up high above his head, covered in strange symbols that glowed soft blue in the dim light. Giant windows showed the gas planet Kepler 442b spinning slowly below them, its purple and gold clouds swirling like paint in water. For 3 hours now, Jake had listened to Chancellor Vexus Thera of the Zephyrian Empire talk about human colonies like they were children playing with toys. The alien looked like a giant green insect standing on 2 legs with 4 arms that moved too fast when she talked. Her voice made clicking sounds between words that hurt Jake's ears. The humans continue to show their lack of understanding, Vexithera said, her voice carrying across the chamber through the translation devices. They plant crops without proper soil analysis. They build cities too close to water sources. They expand too quickly without thinking of consequences. Jake felt his hands close into fists under the table. Behind him, Captain Lisa Bennett of the UES Freedom shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Jake could feel her getting angry too, but she stayed quiet like a good soldier. The human delegation had been waiting 3 standard years for permission to colonize the Tau Ceti system. They had filled out every form the council required. They had sent soil samples, water samples, and air samples from 12 different planets. They had written reports about every plant and animal they found. They had even agreed to follow the council's strict rules about how many people could live on each world. All of that work, and the council had said no anyway. Perhaps, said another voice from across the chamber, the humans need more time to learn proper procedures. This came from Delegate Mordak of the Centaurian Syndicate, a blue-skinned alien with too many eyes. They are still young as a species. Jake heard Lisa take in a sharp breath behind him. He knew what she was thinking. Humans had been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. In that time, they had shared their medical knowledge freely with other species. Human doctors had saved millions of alien lives with new treatments for diseases that had killed for thousands of years. Human engineers had designed better ships, better weapons, and better tools that every species now used. When the Void Seekers had attacked the Andromedian colonies 5 years ago, it was human fleets that had jumped into the fight first. Jake remembered reading the reports. 3 entire human battle groups had been destroyed protecting alien worlds. Over 30,000 human sailors and soldiers had died, fighting an enemy that had never threatened Earth. And now these same aliens talked about humans like they were stupid children. The Tau Ceti system shows clear signs of previous habitation, Vexithara continued, clicking her mandibles together. The ruins suggest an advanced civilization once lived there. Humans lack the patience for proper archaeological study. Jake knew this was a lie. The ruins on Tau Ceti 4 were nothing but broken stone foundations from a species that had died out millions of years ago. Human scientists had spent 2 years studying every piece of rock and metal they could find. They had even found the remains of the ancient aliens and given them proper burial according to their own customs. But the real reason for the delay had nothing to do with archaeology. Jake had seen the private communications between council members. The Zephyrian Empire wanted the mineral rights to Tau Ceti III, which had huge deposits of rare metals used in faster-than-light engines. They had been pressuring other council members to deny human colonization so they could claim the system for themselves. It was all about money and power, just like it always was. Furthermore, Vexithera said, raising one of her 4 arms, human agricultural methods damage soil composition. Their farming techniques are too aggressive for delicate planetary ecosystems. This made Jake's anger flare white-hot in his chest. Human farming fed half the galaxy now. When the crop disease had hit Centaurian Prime 3 years ago, human food shipments had kept 10 billion aliens from starving. Human agricultural scientists had developed new grain varieties that could grow in almost any soil and climate. These same grains now grew on 40 different worlds across council space, but Vexithera talked about human farming like it was somehow primitive and destructive. Jake looked around the chamber at the other delegates. Most of them were not even paying attention to the discussion. Some were reading messages on their personal devices. Others were talking quietly among themselves about trade deals and shipping routes. A few had fallen asleep in their chairs. None of them seemed to care that they were denying humans the right to expand beyond their current 12 colony worlds. None of them seemed to remember that human colonies were overcrowded and running out of resources. Earth's population had reached 15 billion people, and the other human worlds were not much better. Humans needed new places to live and grow food. That was not greed or aggression. That was survival. The Council has made its decision, Vexithara announced, her voice getting louder. The Tau Ceti system will remain off-limits to human colonization, pending further environmental study. This study will take no less than 10 standard years to complete. 10 years. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. In 10 years, millions of humans would be living in conditions that were already too crowded. Children would grow up without enough food or space. Ships full of colonists would have nowhere to go, and meanwhile, the Zephyrian Empire would strip mine 3 other star systems with no oversight at all. The Centaurian Syndicate would continue to control the prices of rare metals throughout the galaxy. The Andromedians would keep building new colonies wherever they wanted, with council approval granted in weeks instead of years. The rules, it seemed, only applied to humans. Jake stood up slowly from his chair. The chamber fell quiet as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him. He had given thousands of speeches in his 20 years as Earth's ambassador, but he had never felt the weight of his words like he did now. For 50 years, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber, humanity has contributed more to this council than any 3 species combined. More aliens looked up from their devices and private conversations. Even some of the sleeping delegates opened their eyes. We have shared our medical advances freely, Jake continued. We have shared our defensive technologies and our agricultural innovations without asking for payment. We have fought alongside you against common enemies and lost entire fleets, protecting your colonies. He paused and looked directly at Chancellor. Vexithara, we have asked for nothing in return but fair treatment. The chamber was completely silent now. Jake could hear the soft hum of the air recycling systems and the distant sound of ships docking at the station's ports. Today, you deny us the right to feed our people while the Zephyrian Empire strip mines 3 systems with no oversight whatsoever. You block our trade routes while allowing the Centaurian Syndicate to monopolize rare Earth elements throughout the galaxy. You make us wait years for permissions that you grant other species in weeks. Jake felt Lisa step up beside him, her hand resting near her sidearm. Other members of the human delegation were standing up from their chairs too. You have made it clear that humanity will always be the junior partner in this alliance, that our contributions will be taken for granted while our needs are ignored, that our people will be treated as second-class citizens in a galaxy they have helped to protect and feed. Chancellor Vexithara clicked her mandibles together rapidly, which Jake knew was a sign of irritation. Perhaps if humanity learned patience and proper procedure instead of rushing headlong into every situation like barbarians. We're done learning, Jake interrupted, his voice cutting through her words like a blade. The chamber erupted into shocked whispers and clicking sounds. No one had ever interrupted a chancellor during a formal session. Jake turned to look at Lisa. Captain Bennett, signal the fleet. We're leaving. Sir? Lisa asked, her eyes wide with surprise. You heard me. Signal all human ships and personnel. We're withdrawing from Council space immediately. Ambassador Morrison, called out Delegate Mordak from across the chamber. Surely you cannot be serious. The Council needs time to discuss. The Council has had 50 years to discuss, Jake replied without turning around. The discussion is over. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Jake could hear the aliens beginning to argue among themselves. Some were demanding that the humans be forced to stay. Others were saying good riddance to troublesome partners who never followed the rules anyway. None of them seemed to understand what they had just lost. None of them realized how much they had come to depend on human contributions to keep their civilization running smoothly. But they would learn soon enough. The heavy doors of the chamber closed behind. The last human delegate, with a sound like thunder, Jake Morrison, had just changed the course of galactic history with a few simple words. Now everyone would have to live with the consequences. 3 weeks had passed since the humans walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, and Dr. Ryan Cole was starting to understand what that really meant. He stood in his laboratory on New Geneva, watching the advanced medical scanner flicker and die for the 3rd time that morning. The machine had been running perfectly for 5 years, scanning patients and saving lives across the Joint Human Centaurian Research Institute. Now it was just an expensive piece of metal and plastic. Dr. Cole called his assistant, a blue-skinned Centaurian named Zekthar. The fusion core is failing again. The diagnostic systems show multiple errors, but I cannot understand the repair codes. Ryan walked over to the scanner and opened the maintenance panel. Inside, the fusion core that powered the machine was flickering between green and red warning lights. The core was human technology, designed by engineers back on Earth. The maintenance manual was written in human technical language that the translation computers could not handle properly. "We need a human technician," Ryan said, though he already knew that was impossible. All human personnel had been recalled to human space when Ambassador Morrison made his announcement. The last human engineer had left New Geneva 2 weeks ago, on a transport ship bound for Earth. "Can we not learn to repair it ourselves?" Zekthar asked, his large eyes looking hopeful. Ryan shook his head. The fusion core was incredibly complex technology that required years of training to understand. Human engineers had built safety systems and backup procedures that seemed simple when they explained them, but were actually based on decades of research and development. Without that knowledge, trying to repair the core would probably just make things worse. "Send a message to the hospital director," Ryan told his assistant. "Tell him we need to move all critical patients to the older scanners in Wing 7. The older scanners were Centaurian technology from before the Human Alliance. They worked, but they were slower and less accurate than the human-designed machines. What used to take 5 minutes would now take an hour. Patients who could have been saved with quick diagnosis would have to wait, and some of them would not survive that wait." Ryan was not the only one dealing with equipment failures. Throughout the galaxy, human-built machines were breaking down without human maintenance. Faster-than-light communicators went silent. Water purification systems stopped working. Power generators shut down one by one. On the bridge of the UES Defender, Admiral Kate Phillips received her 15th distress call of the day. This one came from the Andromedian colony on Kepler 438b, where Void Seeker raiders had attacked 3 mining stations. The colony governor was begging for help, his voice shaking with fear as he spoke through the communication system. "Admiral Phillips, please. You must send ships. The Void Seekers destroyed our orbital defense platform. They are attacking civilian targets now. Hundreds of people are dead already." Kate stared at the star map displayed on the main screen of her bridge. She could see the Kepler system clearly marked in red, indicating it was under attack. Her fleet could reach the system in 6 hours if they jumped immediately. The human battle group had enough firepower to drive off any Void Seeker raiding party, but her orders were clear. "No military aid to Galactic Council members." "I'm sorry, Governor," Kate replied, her voice heavy with regret. "I cannot authorize military action in Council space without direct orders from Earth Command." The governor's voice became desperate. "But Admiral, the Andromedians have always been friends to humanity. We supported your colonies when others opposed them. We voted against the trade restrictions that hurt your shipping companies." Kate knew all of this was true. The Andromedians had been the most reasonable members of the Galactic Council, often supporting human proposals when other species voted against them. But friendship worked both ways, and the Andromedians had still sat quietly while Chancellor Vexathera insulted humanity and denied them basic rights. "I understand your situation," Kate said, "but my hands are tied. Earth Command has ordered all human military forces to withdraw from Council space. We cannot intervene in Council conflicts." The communication channel went silent for several long seconds. When the governor spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Then we are all going to die." The channel closed, leaving Kate staring at the red warning symbols on her display. She knew that without human intervention, the Kepler colony would likely fall within hours. The Andromedian defense fleet was too far away to help, and their ships were not equipped to handle Void Seeker technology. Anyway, thousands of innocent people were about to die because of political decisions made in government chambers. Far from the fighting, on the trading station Nexus Prime, Merchant Captain Tony Rodriguez watched the economic chaos unfolding throughout the galaxy. His cargo ship was one of the last human vessels still operating in Council space, and he could see the problems getting worse every day. The main docking bay that used to handle 50 ships per hour was now backing up with vessels waiting to unload. Human freighters had carried 60% of all intersystem cargo throughout the galaxy, and their sudden disappearance had created a crisis that no one had anticipated. Captain Rodriguez called the station manager, an insectoid alien named Clicktar. "We have 17 cargo ships waiting for berth assignments, but our automated loading systems are malfunctioning again." Tony looked out the observation window at the docking bay. The automated loading arms that moved cargo containers from ships to storage areas were jerking and stopping randomly. These systems had been upgraded with human computer technology 5 years ago, making them 3 times faster and more efficient than the original alien designs. Now, without human programmers to maintain the software, the systems were failing catastrophically. "How long until you get them working?" Tony asked. Clicktar made a frustrated clicking sound with his mandibles. "Our technicians do not understand the human programming code. They estimate it will take weeks to reprogram the systems with our older software, assuming they can figure out how to do it at all." Tony nodded grimly. This was the same story he was hearing at every station and port throughout Council space. Supply chains that had taken decades to build were collapsing within days. The Zephyrian Empire, so quick to criticize human efficiency, was discovering that their own logistics networks could not handle the sudden increase in cargo volume. Food shipments were delayed by weeks. Medical supplies sat in warehouses because no one could coordinate distribution. Industrial materials needed for construction. Projects were stranded on ships that could not find berth space at overcrowded ports. The worst part was watching the aliens blame each other, instead of recognizing the real problem. The Centaurian Syndicate accused the Zephyrians of sabotaging the loading systems to hurt their competitors. The Zephyrians claimed the Andromedians were hoarding cargo space to drive up shipping prices. Everyone had theories about who was responsible for the crisis, but none of them wanted to admit that they had driven away the people who actually knew how to fix things. Tony made his decision. "Clicktar, this is my last cargo run in Council space. After I deliver this load, I'm heading back to human territory." The station manager looked shocked. "But Captain, we have contracts with your company for the next 2 years." "Those contracts were negotiated when humans were part of the Galactic Council," Tony replied. "The situation has changed. I suggest you find alien shipping companies to handle your cargo needs." As Tony prepared to leave Nexus Prime for the last time, he received an urgent message on his personal communicator. The message was from Admiral Phillips, and it contained news that made his blood run cold. The Void Seekers had launched coordinated attacks on 4 different star systems. Without human early warning networks and defensive technologies, 3 major colonies had fallen within hours. The attackers had used new weapons that the Council forces did not know how to counter. The surviving aliens were finally starting to understand what they had lost when humanity left the Council. Humans had not just been participants in galactic defense and commerce. They had been the backbone that held everything together, but understanding the problem and fixing it were 2 very different things. In emergency council sessions, the remaining delegates pointed fingers and assigned blame, while their civilization crumbled around them. The Centaurian Syndicate accused the Zephyrians of driving away their most valuable allies through arrogance and greed. The Andromedians threatened to withdraw their own trade agreements in protest of the Council's treatment of humanity. Chancellor Vexathara tried to maintain order, but even she was beginning to realize the magnitude of the disaster. Without human technology, human logistics, and human military support, the Galactic Council was falling apart faster than anyone had imagined possible. What had been a unified galactic government for over 2 centuries was now fragmenting along species lines. Each group was scrambling to fill the void left by human departure, but none of them had the knowledge or resources to replace what humanity had contributed. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the true cost of taking valuable allies for granted. But for millions of beings across dozens of worlds, that lesson was coming too late to save them from the consequences of the Council's arrogance and stupidity. President Helen Carter stood at the podium in the Great Assembly Hall of Geneva, looking out at the faces of representatives from every human colony in the galaxy. The massive chamber was packed with delegates, military officers, scientists, and civilian leaders who had traveled from 47 different star systems to attend this historic gathering. Behind Helen, a giant display screen showed a map of human space, with bright blue dots marking each colony world. The map looked smaller than it had 6 months ago, when it had included all the joint facilities and shared territories that humanity had abandoned after leaving the Galactic Council. But Helen did not see the map as smaller. She saw it as cleaner, simpler, and entirely their own. "Fellow humans," Helen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. "We stand at a crossroads that will define our species for generations to come. Our former allies in the Galactic Council have made their position clear. They see us as tools to be used when convenient and discarded when we become inconvenient. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Many of the people in the chamber had personal experience with Council arrogance and discrimination. Colony governors who'd been denied basic supplies while alien worlds received preferential treatment. Military officers who had watched their request for backup be ignored while alien fleets received immediate support. Scientists who had been excluded from research projects despite having more knowledge than their alien counterparts. But we are not victims. Helen continued, her voice growing stronger. We are survivors, innovators, and pioneers. We have always been at our best when we depend on ourselves rather than others. Today we choose independence over subjugation. We choose dignity over convenience. We choose to build our own future rather than beg for scraps from those who never respected us. The audience erupted into applause that lasted for several minutes. Helen waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Effective immediately, all human colonies will operate under the authority of the United Earth Government. We will establish our own trade networks, our own defense systems, and our own research programs. We will prove that humanity does not need the Galactic Council to thrive among the stars. While Helen spoke to the assembly, Commander Alan Brooks was already putting those words into action. His colony ship New Horizons had spent 3 months traveling beyond the edge of Council space, searching for a world suitable for human settlement. They had found it orbiting a yellow star similar to Earth's sun, with breathable atmosphere and abundant water. Alan stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the planet grow larger on the main display screen. The world had no name yet in any alien database, which meant humanity could claim it without asking permission from anyone. Initial scans show the planet is perfect for human settlement, reported his science officer, Dr. Nancy White. Gravity is 95% of Earth normal, atmosphere is 21% oxygen, and surface temperatures range from -10 to +35 degrees Celsius. We have detected no signs of intelligent life. Alan nodded with satisfaction. This world would become humanity's first truly independent colony, established without council oversight or alien interference. They would call it Haven, and it would serve as proof that humans could build thriving civilizations on their own. Begin landing procedures, Alan ordered. Signal Earth Command that we have found our new home. The first shuttles touched down on Haven's surface 3 days later. Within a week, temporary shelters were constructed and power systems were online. Within a month, the colony had established farms, workshops, and communication arrays. The colonists worked with an energy and enthusiasm that Alan had never seen before, driven by the knowledge that they were building something entirely their own. But independence brought challenges as well as opportunities. Dr. Amanda Foster learned this firsthand aboard the research vessel, Explorer, where she was trying to replicate certain alien technologies that humanity had grown dependent on during their time in the Council. The biggest problem was atmospheric processors, the massive machines that could transform the air composition of entire planets. Humans had been using Zephyrian-designed processors for 20 years, but they had never learned to build their own. Without access to Zephyrian manufacturing facilities, new colonies would have to rely on planets with naturally breathable atmospheres. The processor designs are incredibly complex, Amanda explained to her research team during their daily briefing. The Zephyrians use quantum field manipulation to alter molecular structures at the atmospheric level. We understand the basic principles, but we lack the specialized equipment needed for manufacturing. Amanda's colleague, Dr. Carl Peterson, looked frustrated. So we're stuck with naturally habitable worlds only. That limits our expansion options significantly. Amanda shook her head. Not necessarily. We just need to approach the problem differently. Human engineering has always been about finding simpler solutions to complex problems. Instead of trying to copy Zephyrian technology, we should develop our own atmospheric modification systems. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, when Amanda realized that human industrial technology could be adapted for atmospheric processing. Instead of using quantum manipulation, they could use chemical processing plants to gradually alter planetary atmospheres over several years. The process would take longer than Zephyrian methods, but it would be entirely under human control. Communication was another challenge that humanity solved through innovation rather than imitation. The Centaurian quantum communicators that had connected human colonies to the galactic network were incredibly advanced, allowing instant communication across hundreds of light years. but they required rare materials that only the Centaurians knew how to process. Communications specialist Carol Newman developed an alternative system based on quantum relay stations positioned throughout human space. The stations would boost and redirect quantum signals, creating a network that covered all human colonies without depending on alien technology. The relay system will take 6 months to fully deploy, Carol reported during a conference call with Earth Command. But once it's operational, we'll have better communication range and reliability than the old Centaurian network. The most important changes were happening on the human worlds themselves. Free from council regulations and bureaucratic restrictions, human colonies began experimenting with new forms of government, revolutionary scientific approaches, and bold exploration missions. The planet Olympus became a center for advanced artificial intelligence research that would have been forbidden under council oversight. Scientists there developed AI systems that could manage entire industrial complexes, coordinate shipping across multiple star systems, and even assist in terraforming operations. New California developed agricultural techniques that produced 3 times more food per acre than traditional farming methods. Their vertical farms and hydroponic facilities became models that other colonies quickly adopted. Solving food shortage problems that had plagued human worlds for decades, the mining colony on Kepler 442c discovered new methods for extracting rare metals that were both more efficient and less environmentally damaging than traditional techniques. Within months, human colonies were producing enough raw materials to supply their own industrial needs without importing anything from alien sources. Most surprising of all was the number of aliens who began requesting permission to emigrate to human space. Scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens from dozens of different species applied for residency on human worlds, seeking the freedom and opportunities that were no longer available in council space. Dr. Zara Lynn, an Andromedan physicist, was one of the first to arrive on Earth. She had been working on faster-than-light propulsion research when the council cut funding for any projects that might give humanity technological advantages. On Andromeda Prime, I was told my research was too dangerous and uncontrolled, Zara Lynn explained to her new human colleagues. Here, you encourage me to push boundaries and explore new possibilities. This is what scientific research should be. As news of human prosperity spread throughout the galaxy, more aliens began to look toward human space with envy and hope. The rigid council hierarchy that had seemed so stable and permanent was proving to be a barrier to progress rather than a foundation for civilization. Helen Carter received regular reports about conditions in council space, and the news grew worse each week. Trade networks continued to collapse without human logistics support. The Void Seeker attacks were becoming more frequent and more destructive, without human military coordination. Several council worlds were experiencing food shortages as their agricultural systems failed without human expertise. But Helen felt no satisfaction in the suffering of former allies. She had hoped that leaving the council would teach the aliens to treat humanity with respect, not that it would destroy their entire civilization. We cannot let billions of innocent beings suffer because their leaders were too arrogant to treat us fairly, Helen told her advisors during a cabinet meeting. If they ask for help, we should consider providing it, but only as equals, not as the junior partners we once were. The test of that policy was coming sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence reports suggested 2 years after humanity left the Galactic Council, General Sam Turner stood on the bridge of the UES Vigilant, watching the worst disaster in galactic history unfold before his eyes. The main display screen showed 7 star systems burning under Void Seeker attacks, each one a bright red dot on what had once been a peaceful sector of council space. The Void Seekers had been the galaxy's greatest enemy for over 1,000 years. Raiders and destroyers who appeared without warning to attack colonies and trading stations. For decades, the combined fleets of the Galactic Council had kept them contained in the dark regions beyond civilized space. But now, without human tactical coordination and advanced warning systems, the ancient enemy had returned with a vengeance. General Turner called his communications officer, Lieutenant Greg Walsh. We're receiving distress signals from the Centaurian system. The orbital defense platforms have been destroyed, and civilian evacuation. Ships are under attack. Sam watched the tactical display as red symbols representing Void Seeker vessels swarmed through the Centaurian home system like angry insects. Civilian ships were fleeing in all directions, but many of them were too slow to escape the enemy's advanced pursuit craft. Escape pods dotted the display, showing where passenger ships had been destroyed with thousands of people aboard. "Any word from the Council Defense Fleet?" Sam asked. "The Centaurian Fourth Fleet was destroyed 3 hours ago," Greg replied, his voice grim. "The Zephyrian reinforcements won't arrive for another 6 hours, and intelligence suggests they'll face the same fate." Sam felt sick watching the slaughter, but his orders were clear. The Human Defense Force was to protect human space and avoid involvement in Council conflicts. Even though thousands of innocent civilians were dying, he could not authorize military action without direct permission from Earth Command. The situation became even worse when the Void Seekers deployed their new weapon. Sam watched in horror as space itself seemed to tear apart near the Centaurian homeworld. Reality twisted and warped, creating a distortion field that destroyed everything it touched. Ships, space stations, and even moons were pulled into the expanding tear in spacetime and simply vanished. "My God," whispered Dr. Karen Ross from her position at the science station. "That's a reality distortion weapon." The theoretical paper suggested such things were impossible. Sam turned to look at her. "You've seen research on this type of weapon?" Karen nodded, her face pale. Human scientists were working on countermeasures 5 years ago, but the project was classified. The research was being conducted jointly with Andromedan physicists at the Deep Space Nine facility, but we abandoned the project when we left the Council. The irony was bitter. Humanity possessed knowledge that could potentially save the galaxy, but political barriers prevented them from sharing that knowledge with those who needed it most. The same aliens who had dismissed human scientists as primitive and impatient were now dying because they lacked access to human research. "Can we develop countermeasures without the Andromedan data?" Sam asked. "Possibly," Karen replied, "but we would need access to quantum laboratories with very specific equipment, the kind of equipment that exists on only a few research stations throughout the galaxy, most of which are in Council space." Sam looked back at the display screen, where the reality distortion was continuing to expand. At its current rate of growth, it would consume the entire Centaurian system within days. After that, it would probably continue growing until it reached other star systems, potentially destroying dozens of worlds and trillions of lives. The tactical situation was growing worse by the hour. Void Seeker fleets had appeared in 4 different sectors simultaneously, suggesting a level of coordination that the galaxy had never seen before. Without human intelligence networks and early warning systems, Council forces had no way to predict where the next attack would come. Individual human officers were beginning to act on their own initiative, ignoring orders to stay out of Council space. Captain Paul Mitchell of the cargo vessel Liberty received a distress call from an Andromedan refugee ship carrying 10,000 civilians, including many children. The ship had suffered engine damage while fleeing the fighting and was drifting helplessly in space. Paul made his decision quickly. "Plot an intercept course," he ordered his crew. "We're going to assist that refugee ship." "Sir," his first officer replied, "Earth Command has ordered all vessels to avoid contact with Council ships." "Earth Command isn't watching 10,000 innocent people about to die," Paul said firmly. "Prepare the tractor beam." The Liberty reached the refugee ship just as Void Seeker raiders appeared on the edge of the system. Paul's crew worked frantically to repair the Andromedan vessel's engines, while the enemy ships closed in. The refugees watched through their viewports as the human cargo ship placed itself between them and the attackers, buying precious time with its shields and defensive weapons. Similar acts of heroism were happening throughout the conflict zone. Lieutenant Emma Clark sacrificed her patrol ship to evacuate a Centaurian research station, saving thousands of alien scientists and their families. Commander Nick Davis led his squadron in an unauthorized rescue mission that saved an entire civilian convoy from destruction. These actions did not go unnoticed by the surviving council members. Moderate voices within the government, led by Andromedan delegate Zara Lynn, began calling for reconciliation with humanity. But even those who wanted to ask for help were divided about how to approach the people they had once dismissed and insulted. The crisis reached its peak when the Void Seekers launched a massive assault on the Council's core worlds. 3 battle fleets appeared simultaneously in the solar systems containing the Zephyrian, Centaurian, and Andromedan homeworlds. The coordination required for such an attack suggested that the enemy had been planning this offensive for years. Chancellor Vexthara watched from her command center as Void Seeker ships descended on the outer planets of her home system. The proud Zephyrian defense fleet that had seemed so powerful during peacetime was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with tactics and weapons beyond their understanding. Chancellor called her military advisor. The 3rd Defense Squadron has been eliminated. The enemy is advancing on the industrial colonies. We estimate complete system conquest within 18 hours. Vexithara had spent her entire career believing that the Zephyrian Empire was the most advanced and powerful civilization in the galaxy. Her people had developed faster than light travel, conquered dozens of worlds, and built cities that stretched across continents. But now she watched all of that progress crumbling under assault from an enemy that her forces could not even slow down. The same story was playing out across 3 different star systems. The Centaurian Syndicate's famous commercial fleet was being hunted down and destroyed by Void Seeker raiders. The Andromedian colonies that had survived for thousands of years were falling one by one to an enemy that seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Emergency council sessions had devolved into chaos and recrimination. Species that had cooperated for centuries were now blaming each other for the disaster. The Centaurians accused the Zephyrians of weakening galactic defenses through their arrogance. The Andromedians threatened to withdraw from the Council entirely and seek separate peace with the Void Seekers. But gradually, as the scope of the catastrophe became clear, even the most stubborn Council members began to realize that they needed help from the only people who had ever successfully coordinated large-scale defenses against the Void Seekers. They needed human tactical expertise, human technology, and human leadership to save their worlds from destruction. The question was whether they were humble enough to ask for that help, and whether humanity would be willing to forgive past insults to save former allies from annihilation. Chancellor Vexithara made the decision that changed everything. Standing in her damaged command center as enemy ships approached her homeworld, she opened a communication channel that broadcast across the entire galaxy. Her image appeared on screens throughout human space, showing a proud leader who had been forced to admit her own failures. "People of humanity," she began, her voice shaking with emotion. "We were wrong about you. We treated you with disrespect and arrogance when you deserved our gratitude and friendship. We ignored your contributions and dismissed your capabilities. Now our worlds are burning and our people are dying because we drove away the allies we needed most." She paused, struggling with words that went against everything she had believed about Zephyrian superiority. "We need your help. We are prepared to offer full partnership, equal representation in a new galactic government, and formal recognition of human sovereignty over your chosen territories. Please, if you have any compassion for the innocent people of our worlds, help us survive this crisis." The message ended, leaving Vexithara standing alone in her command center as explosions lit up the sky outside. She had just done something no Zephyrian leader had ever done before. She had admitted weakness and asked for help from people her species had always considered inferior. Now she could only wait to see if humanity would answer her call, or if the galaxy would burn while former allies settled their political differences. President Helen Carter stood in the same chamber where humanity had once been dismissed and belittled, but now she faced a very different audience. The surviving council members looked at her with expressions she had never seen before on alien faces. Fear, respect, and desperate hope mixed together as they waited to hear whether humanity would save them from the Void Seeker invasion. The great chamber showed signs of recent battle damage. Scorch marks ran along the curved walls where energy weapons had missed their targets. Several of the delegate platforms had been destroyed, leaving empty spaces where proud species representatives had once sat. The viewing windows that had shown the peaceful gas giant Kepler 442b now revealed the wreckage of destroyed ships drifting in orbit around the station. "Chancellor Vexithara," Helen began, her voice carrying clearly through the damaged chamber. "3 days ago you broadcast a message asking for humanity's help. You offered full partnership, equal representation, and recognition of our sovereignty. Today I am here to give you our answer." The remaining aliens leaned forward in their seats. Vexithara herself looked older than Helen remembered, her green carapace marked with stress lines and her movements slower than before. The proud Zephyrian leader who had once dismissed humans as primitive troublemakers now waited anxiously to hear if those same humans would save her people from extinction. "We will help," Helen announced, and the chamber erupted in relieved whispers and clicking sounds. But not as subordinates returning to an old arrangement that failed. We propose something entirely new. A galactic federation based on equality for all species, shared governance, and mutual respect as our founding principles. Helen gestured toward the damaged walls around them. This chamber represents the failure of the old system. A system where some species were considered more valuable than others, where arrogance and prejudice guided policy decisions, where the contributions of entire civilizations were taken for granted and dismissed. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. The new federation will have no senior or junior partners. No species will have veto power over others. All decisions will be made by majority vote of democratically elected representatives. And most importantly, no member will ever again be treated as expendable or unimportant. Chancellor Vexthera rose from her damaged platform. President Carter, on behalf of the surviving council members, we accept your proposal. We will dissolve the old Galactic Council and help establish this new federation, under whatever terms you consider fair. Helen nodded. Then let us begin. Admiral Phillips is already en route with the combined human fleet. Our first priority is stopping the Void Seeker advance and saving as many lives as possible. Admiral Kate Phillips stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching the largest fleet in human history prepare for battle. Around her flagship, 300 human warships moved in perfect formation toward the Centaurian system, where the heaviest fighting was taking place. The fleet included vessels from every human colony, crewed by volunteers who had answered the call to save former enemies. Admiral, reported her tactical officer, we have visual contact with the Void Seeker fleet. Enemy ships number approximately 800 vessels, but they're spread throughout the system attacking different targets. Kate studied the tactical display with the experience of someone who had fought these enemies for decades. The Void Seekers were powerful individually, but they had always relied on surprise and overwhelming local superiority to win battles. They had never faced a coordinated defense led by someone who understood their tactics. Signal the fleet, Kate ordered. Execute Formation Gamma 7. All ships target their assigned sectors. Remember, our job is to protect the civilian evacuation ships and give our scientists time to deploy the reality distortion countermeasures. The human fleet split into smaller squadrons, each one moving to intercept different groups of Void Seeker raiders. Kate had studied every battle report from the past 2 years, analyzing enemy tactics and identifying weaknesses. The aliens had been fighting defensively, trying to protect fixed positions. Kate planned to take the fight to the enemy. The battle began with a coordinated strike by human long-range weapon systems. Unlike the energy-based weapons favored by Council species, human ships used kinetic projectiles that could not be deflected by Void Seeker shields. The enemy vessels, caught by surprise by tactics they had never encountered, took heavy damage in the opening minutes of the fight. But Kate knew the real test would come when the Void Seekers deployed their reality distortion weapon. She watched her sensors as space began to warp near the center of the Centaurian system, creating the same type of reality tear that had already consumed 3 other star systems. Dr. Ross, Kate called to the science station, deploy the countermeasure probes now. Dr. Karen Ross had spent 6 months working with Andromedian scientists to develop a defense against the reality distortion weapon. The solution was typically human in its simplicity. Instead of trying to prevent the reality tear, they would stabilize it and then collapse it in a controlled manner. 12 small probes launched from human ships and flew directly into the expanding distortion field. Each probe contained a quantum stabilizer that would create anchor points in normal space, preventing the reality tear from growing larger. The probes had only a small chance of success, but they were humanity's best hope for stopping the weapon that had already destroyed entire star systems. Kate watched her displays as the probes entered the distortion field and began transmitting stabilization signals. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The reality tear continued to expand, consuming everything in its path. Then slowly, the expansion began to slow. The edges of the distortion field started to solidify as the quantum anchors took hold. Within an hour, the reality tear had stopped growing entirely. Within 6 hours, it had collapsed back into normal space, leaving only empty vacuum where it had been. The Void Seeker fleet, seeing their ultimate weapon neutralized, began to retreat toward the edge of the system. But Kate was not finished with them. Human pursuit squadrons followed the enemy ships, using superior speed and coordination. to hunt down raiders that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. The victory at Centaurus Prime was repeated across multiple star systems as human fleets arrived to reinforce desperate alien defenders. The combination of human tactical expertise, advanced weapons, and reality distortion countermeasures turned the tide of the war within weeks. Engineer Danny Walsh coordinated the massive reconstruction effort that followed the military victories. Human industrial ships arrived in devastated systems with prefabricated habitats, medical facilities, and power generators. The same efficiency that had once annoyed alien bureaucrats now saved millions of lives as homeless refugees were provided with shelter and supplies. The reconstruction brought unprecedented cooperation between human and alien workers. Human engineers worked alongside Centaurian technicians to rebuild destroyed space stations. Human doctors shared their medical knowledge with Andromedan healers to treat injured civilians. Human farmers helped Zephyrian colonists replant destroyed agricultural areas using techniques that both species had developed. Together, the new cooperation led to technological breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved alone. Human adaptability combined with alien theoretical knowledge created advances in faster-than-light travel, energy generation, and planetary engineering. The shared research programs produced innovations that benefited everyone in the new Federation. 5 years after the signing of the Federation Charter, Ambassador Jake Morrison stood in the same chamber where humanity had once walked out in anger and frustration. But now the chamber had been completely rebuilt, with platforms arranged in a circle instead of hierarchical tiers. No species sat higher than others. No delegation was given more prominent positions. Jake looked around the chamber at delegates representing 14 different species, all working together to address the challenges of governing a diverse galactic civilization. The Zephyrians had learned to value cooperation over dominance. The Centaurians had discovered that shared prosperity was more valuable than monopolized profits. The Andromedians had found that their scientific traditions were enhanced, rather than threatened by human innovation. The Federal Assembly recognizes the delegate from New Geneva, announced the session moderator, a position that rotated between species every year. Jake rose from his seat to address the assembly. Fellow beings of the galaxy, today marks the 5th anniversary of the Federation Charter. 5 years ago, our civilizations were enemies or strangers. Today, we are partners working toward common goals. He gestured toward the viewing windows, which now showed a peaceful starfield where human and alien ships traveled together on joint missions of exploration and trade. We have learned that diversity is our strength, not our weakness. That cooperation produces better results than competition. That treating all beings with dignity and respect creates a foundation for lasting peace and prosperity. Jake paused to look at Chancellor Vex Thara, who now served as the Zephyrian Federation representative. The former council leader had become one of humanity's strongest advocates, working tirelessly to ensure that no species would ever again be